I never thought I'd be the kind of guy to find myself in this situation, but here we are. My name's Mark, and I'm a 38-year-old software engineer. I've been married to Lisa for almost 10 years. At first, it was all roses and sunshine. We were that couple everyone envied. We had a nice house in a decent neighborhood, a couple of dogs, and life was generally good, or so I thought. But lately, things felt off. Lisa had been distant. I could tell she was preoccupied with something, though she wouldn't tell me what. Little things started to change. She'd come home late from work more often, claiming she was stuck in meetings, and her phone seemed glued to her hand. I noticed her getting secretive about her texts, turning her screen away when I walked into the room. It felt like there was a wall slowly being built between us, and I didn't know what to do about it. Last month, I caught a glimpse of a credit card statement, our joint credit card. Lisa had been racking up charges like crazy. I mean, I knew we were splurging a little, but a few $100s at a fancy restaurant. I made a mental note to ask her about it. But when I confronted her, she just brushed it off with a dismissive wave of her hand, saying it was just a night out with coworkers. I wanted to believe her, but something gnawed at me. Things escalated when I found an unfamiliar name on her phone. It was the name of a guy from her work, someone I'd never heard her mention before. I tried to play it cool, but my gut was doing somersaults. I felt betrayed even before I confirmed my suspicions. One night after a particularly late meeting, I decided to follow her. I know it sounds crazy, but I had to know for sure. I waited until she left the house, my heart pounding in my chest like a drum. I followed her to a bar downtown. When I walked in, I felt like my world was about to shatter. There she was, laughing, touching this guy's arm and leaning in way too close. I could barely breathe. My stomach twisted as I watched her, the woman I'd built my life with, flirting with another man right in front of me. It felt surreal, like I was watching a soap opera unfold in real life. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to confront them right then and there, but I felt paralyzed. Instead, I slipped out of the bar and drove home, fury and heartbreak boiling inside me. How could she, after all we'd been through? I'd supported her career, stood by her through everything, and this is how she repaid me. When Lisa got home that night, she could see something was wrong. I confronted her right there in our living room. I threw the words out like daggers, demanding to know who that guy was and why she had been so distant. She tried to deny everything at first, claiming it was just a friendly drink, but I wasn't buying it. "Mark, you're being ridiculous," she said, rolling her eyes. "It was nothing. You're reading too much into this." But I was. I laid it all out, the credit cards, the late nights, and the flirty texts. Her reactions were a mix of defensiveness and anger, like I had betrayed her by questioning her loyalty. It was maddening. In that moment, I felt like I was losing everything: my wife, my trust, and my sense of self. I stormed out of the room, feeling like a complete fool. This wasn't just a fight, this was a reckoning. I spent the night on the couch, tossing and turning, trapped in a whirlwind of emotions. I thought about our marriage, the life we'd built, and how it all felt like a lie. I had to figure out my next move, but all I felt was confusion and rage. As the sun peeked through the curtains the next morning, I knew I had decisions to make. I could either confront this head-on or take a step back and plot out my revenge. Either way, I was done being the victim in my own life. What would you do in my shoes? How do you even begin to pick up the pieces after something like this? The morning after the confrontation, I woke up feeling like I had been hit by a truck. My mind was racing, and my heart was heavy. Lisa was in the kitchen making breakfast. The smell of bacon filled the air, but it felt like a cruel joke, like an illusion of normalcy. I sat at the table trying to process everything, but all I could think about was betrayal. "Mark, are you okay?" she asked, her voice dripping with faux concern. I could see the guilt in her eyes, but she was trying to play it off, acting like nothing had happened. I wanted to scream at her, to demand she admit what she had done, but I held it together. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of seeing me break down. I decided to take a day off work. I needed time to think, time to plan. I didn't want to react impulsively. I wanted to be strategic. My mind raced with thoughts of revenge, but I didn't want my actions to come from a place of pure anger. I wanted to make sure she felt the weight of what she had done. After she left for work, I sat down with my laptop and started digging. The first thing I did was search for the guy I saw her with. His name was Jason. Simple enough, right? I quickly found his LinkedIn profile, and sure enough, he was a project manager at her company. I felt a jolt of anger at the thought of him being the one to steal my wife's affection. I took a screenshot of his profile and saved it for later. Next, I decided to keep tabs on Lisa's spending habits. I logged into our joint credit card account and began to comb through her transactions. That's when I found it, a charge for a hotel. My heart raced. It was for the weekend she'd claimed she was visiting her sister. I stared at the screen, feeling sick to my stomach. I knew in that moment that I had to confront her with this evidence. I couldn't let her lie her way out of this. The day dragged on and I felt like I was in a fog. I couldn't stop thinking about the life we had built together and how easily it was slipping away. I wanted to confront Lisa again, but I wanted to do it on my terms, not hers. I needed to gather more evidence to make sure I had enough to catch her in her lies. I decided to visit the hotel. It was only a few miles from our house, and I needed to know if she was really there. I parked outside, my heart racing as I scanned the parking lot. I felt like a private investigator, watching and waiting. I saw a few couples and families walk in, but my focus was solely on that entrance. After an hour of waiting, I finally spotted her. Lisa stepped out of a car with Jason, laughing and looking more alive than I'd seen her in months. I felt my world collapse around me. Anger surged through me as I watched them walk into the hotel. I wanted to charge in there and confront her, but I knew that would only complicate things. I had to keep my cool and stick to my plan. Instead, I took a few pictures of them from afar, my hands shaking as I captured the evidence of her betrayal. My gut twisted as I snapped the shots, but I knew it was necessary. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my life. I drove home feeling a mix of triumph and devastation. I had what I needed. Now it was time to strategize my next move. I could play the victim, or I could take control of this situation. I decided I wouldn't play nice anymore. That night when Lisa came home, I was ready. I'd set the scene, pouring myself a glass of whiskey to calm my nerves. When she walked in, I could sense her unease immediately. "Hey, how was your day?" she asked, and I could hear the tension in her voice. "Let's talk," I said, my tone steady. I gestured for her to sit down. The facade of normalcy she tried to maintain was crumbling, and I could see her mind racing, already knowing something was off. "What is it?" she asked, crossing her arms defensively. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. It was time to lay everything out on the table. I decided to start with the hotel. I saw the charge for the hotel. "Lisa, care to explain?" Her face paled as her eyes widened. "You were snooping through our accounts. That's so unfair." I cut her off. "Unfair? How is it unfair when you've been lying to me? You've been with Jason, haven't you? I saw you two together, laughing and enjoying yourselves at that hotel." The color drained from her face, and for a moment I thought I saw a flicker of genuine fear. She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. "Mark, I can explain," she stammered, but I held up a hand to silence her. "No, you don't get to explain. You've lied to me for months." I shouted, my voice echoing in the silence of our home. I felt powerful but also vulnerable. I was standing at the edge of a precipice, ready to dive into the unknown. Her eyes darted around, searching for an escape, but there was nowhere to run. I was done being the fool, done being the one who was always understanding. "I want a divorce," I said, my voice steady, "and I'll make sure you pay for what you've done." The shock on her face mirrored the turmoil in my heart. I didn't want things to end this way, but I knew I couldn't keep living a lie. I wanted her to feel the consequences of her actions, to realize what she was losing. That night, as I went to bed alone, I felt a mixture of regret and relief. I had taken a stand, but my heart still ached. It was going to be a long and messy battle, but I was ready to fight for my life back. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions. Lisa was in a state of disbelief, but I could see the anger bubbling beneath the surface. She went from being the cold, dismissive person I had confronted to desperate pleadings for my forgiveness. Every time I saw her, it felt like I was looking at a stranger, someone I had loved deeply but who had betrayed me in the worst way possible. At first, I tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy. We shared a home, after all, and the logistics of our lives were still intertwined, but every conversation felt like walking through a minefield. Lisa would try to talk to me, saying things like, "We can work this out, Mark, I made a mistake," or "You don't mean that, you don't want a divorce." But I was resolute. I had seen enough. I had the proof, and I wasn't going to be the fool. I began to gather my thoughts and put together a plan. I knew I would need to consult a lawyer, something I had never imagined doing. Just a few months prior, I had always envisioned a future with Lisa that involved growing old together, but that future was gone now, replaced by the cold reality of betrayal. As I researched local family lawyers, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. I was about to embark on a journey that would change my life forever. One evening, while sifting through paperwork, I received a text from Lisa. "Can we talk, please? I'm sorry for everything." I stared at the screen, debating whether to respond. Part of me still cared about her, the part that remembered the good times, the laughter, and the love we once shared. But I couldn't let that part of me take control. I replied, "I don't think there's anything left to talk about." I hit send and immediately felt a twinge of guilt, but I brushed it off. I was doing what I needed to do to protect myself. The next day, I met with a lawyer named Sarah. She was sharp, confident, and had an air of authority that reassured me. As she explained the ins and outs of the divorce process, I felt a sense of clarity. I needed to focus on myself, on my future without Lisa. She outlined the steps I'd need to take, including how to handle the division of assets, alimony, and even the potential for custody of our dogs. It felt surreal to discuss these things, but I knew I had to be prepared. Meanwhile, Lisa continued her attempts to reach out. I received messages begging me to reconsider, to meet for coffee, to talk things over. I ignored them all, feeling a mix of anger and pity. Part of me wanted to scream at her for what she had done, but I also wanted to shield myself from the emotional turmoil her words stirred up within me. I was tired of being hurt. In the midst of this chaos, I decided to reach out to a close friend, Jake. He had been my confidant since college, and I knew he would have my back. Over beers at our favorite bar, I laid everything out: the affair, the divorce, the plans I was making. Jake listened intently, his face a mixture of disbelief and sympathy. "Man, I can't believe she did that to you," he said, shaking his head. "You deserve way better, you've always been there for her." "I thought so too," I replied, frustration bubbling to the surface. But clearly I was wrong. I just can't wrap my head around how she could betray me like this. I mean, who does that? Jake leaned back in his chair, taking a sip of his beer. "The truth is, Mark, you just have to focus on yourself now. Don't let her manipulate you into feeling guilty for wanting out. You've got to do what's best for you." His words struck a chord. I didn't need to feel guilty. I had done nothing wrong, yet here I was, haunted by the shadows of our marriage. I took a deep breath and resolved to stay strong. That night I went home and went through the evidence I had collected. I looked at the pictures I had taken of Lisa and Jason. They were like daggers to my heart, but I knew I needed to keep them. They were my safety net. If she tried to lie or manipulate her way out of this, I would be ready. As the days turned into weeks, the emotional toll began to weigh heavily on me. I found myself oscillating between anger and sadness. I would occasionally hear Lisa crying in her room, and each time it twisted the knife a little deeper. I could hear her trying to plead her case, talking to herself about how she made a mistake, how everything was going to be okay. But I knew it wouldn't. One evening she approached me with tears in her eyes, looking vulnerable and desperate. "Mark, please, I miss us. I miss you," she said, her voice trembling. That moment I felt a flicker of sympathy. It was hard to see someone I once loved in so much pain, but I had to remind myself why I was doing this. "You made your choice, Lisa. You chose him over me. You can't just turn back time because you're feeling guilty now." Her expression changed as she realized I wasn't going to give in. "You're being unfair. I thought we had a good marriage." "Did you?" I shot back, my voice rising. "Did you really think that while you were sleeping with someone else?" "You can't have it both ways. You've broken my trust, and it's going to take a lot more than tears to fix that." She recoiled, and for a moment we stood there in silence, the weight of our shattered relationship hanging heavy in the air. I felt the surge of emotions rise within me again, but I pushed them down. This was no longer about love, it was about survival. That night I made a decision. I was going to go through with the divorce, no matter how painful it would be. I had to reclaim my life piece by piece. I could no longer allow Lisa's betrayal to dictate my happiness. As hard as it was to admit, she was no longer the person I thought I married. And so I began to shift my focus. I started to think about my future, what I wanted for myself, and how I could rebuild my life. I began to envision new beginnings, a life where I didn't have to look over my shoulder, a life free from deceit. It was time to put my plan into action. I had the evidence, I had the resolve, and I was ready to take back my life. The divorce process was anything but easy. It felt like I was navigating a minefield, each step bringing new challenges and emotional turmoil. I'd learned that divorce wasn't just about severing ties. It was about untangling years of shared experiences, finances, and, unfortunately, heartache. I had my first meeting with my lawyer, Sarah, to go over the next steps. She laid out everything clearly, but the reality of what I was facing began to sink in. We discussed asset division, alimony, and even the potential for custody of our two dogs, Rex and Bella. I wanted to fight for them. They were part of my life, and I couldn't bear the thought of losing them in the process. As I sat across from Sarah, I felt a mix of determination and dread. "I just want this to be over as quickly as possible," I said, my voice tinged with frustration. "I can't keep living like this." "I understand," she replied, her tone professional but sympathetic. "But you need to be prepared for this to take time. Emotions will run high, especially since there's infidelity involved. Lisa will likely try to manipulate the narrative." I nodded, knowing she was right. The thought of Lisa trying to spin the story in her favor made my blood boil. "I just want to make sure she can't twist things around. I have proof of the affair, and I'm not going to let her gaslight me." "Good," Sarah said. "Hold on to that evidence. It will be crucial if there are any disputes about alimony or the divorce settlement." As I left the meeting, I felt a sense of clarity. I was no longer the victim in this situation. I was taking control of my life. It was empowering, but it was also daunting. I had to prepare myself for what lay ahead. The next few weeks were tense. Lisa continued to reach out, trying to convince me that we could work things out. Every time she sent a text or called, I felt a mix of anger and pity. It was hard to reconcile the woman I once loved with the one who betrayed me. I ignored her pleas, determined to keep my resolve firm. Then came the day of our first mediation session. I arrived at the office, feeling a knot in my stomach. Lisa was already there, her gaze shifting nervously. I could see she had been crying, her makeup slightly smudged. I felt a pang of sympathy but quickly pushed it aside. I had to focus on myself. As we sat down with the mediator, I could sense the tension in the air. The mediator introduced herself and explained the process. "This is an opportunity for both of you to discuss the terms of your divorce amicably," she said, looking back and forth between us. Lisa went first, attempting to paint a picture of us as a couple that had lost its way. "We were once so happy," she began, her voice wavering. "I made a mistake and I know that, but I believe we can still be friends for the sake of our dogs and everything we built together." I could feel my blood boiling as she spoke. "Friends," I scoffed, cutting her off. "You don't get to rewrite our history, Lisa. You made a choice to cheat on me. You were ready to throw everything away for a fling. You can't pretend that everything is fine now." The mediator intervened, urging us to keep things civil, but I could see Lisa's expression shift. She was angry now, and it was evident. We went back and forth, discussing assets and debts, but it quickly became clear that this wasn't going to be easy. At one point, Lisa tried to appeal to my emotions. "I loved you, Mark. I still love you," she said, her voice rising in desperation. "I was just confused. I never meant to hurt you." I shot back. "Love doesn't justify cheating, Lisa. You wanted to have your cake and eat it too. You can't come in here and act like you can still keep me in your life after what you did." The mediator attempted to keep the peace, but I could feel the tension escalating. I decided to take a deep breath and focus on the facts. "I have evidence of the affair. I'm not going to let you manipulate the narrative here." Lisa's expression shifted from desperation to indignation. "That's low, Mark. You wouldn't do that if you truly cared about me." I leaned forward. "This isn't about you anymore." It's about me reclaiming my life. You made your choices, and now you have to face the consequences." The session ended on a tense note with no agreement reached. We left the office in silence, and I couldn't shake the feeling of anger that coursed through me. I felt like I was fighting a losing battle, but I couldn't give up. I had to keep pushing forward. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself leaning on my support system more and more. I spent time with Jake, who reminded me of my worth and encouraged me to stay strong. I also started going to a support group for men dealing with infidelity. It was a strange experience at first, but hearing other men share their stories made me feel less alone. I found camaraderie in our shared pain, and it helped me gain perspective. One night, after a particularly tough meeting, I walked home feeling empowered. I decided to treat myself to dinner at my favorite restaurant, a place Lisa and I used to go to often. I knew it would be hard, but I wanted to reclaim the space. As I sat at the bar, sipping a whiskey and enjoying my meal, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. I was starting to embrace my new reality, and for the first time in a while I felt a flicker of hope. I texted Jake, sharing the small victory of enjoying my own company. "Tonight was good. I think I'm finally starting to let go." His response came almost instantly. "That's what I like to hear. You deserve happiness, buddy. Take it one day at a time." As I finished my meal, I realized that I was no longer just a victim in this story. I was a survivor, and I was ready to face whatever came next. I had my proof, my resolve, and a community of support. I was going to get through this, and I would come out stronger on the other side. But Lisa wasn't done fighting yet. I could feel it in my bones that this was only the beginning. As I left the restaurant that night, I steeled myself for the battles ahead. The war was far from over, and I was determined to win. The mediation sessions dragged on, each one more emotionally charged than the last. Lisa seemed to oscillate between pleading for forgiveness and trying to manipulate the situation in her favor. Each time we met, I found myself gaining more clarity about what I wanted. It wasn't just about the divorce. It was about reclaiming my identity, my happiness, and my future. One night after returning from another fraught session, I sat down on the couch and finally opened up to Rex and Bella, my faithful companions. They snuggled up beside me, sensing my frustration. "You guys deserve a better home than this," I said, stroking their fur. "I promise we'll get through this." I needed to focus on the positives in my life. I decided to channel my energy into something productive. I started researching new hobbies and interests, things I had pushed aside while trying to maintain peace in my marriage. I enrolled in a cooking class, something I had always wanted to do but never found the time for. I figured it was a good way to meet new people and take my mind off the drama. The cooking class was a breath of fresh air. I found myself laughing and connecting with the other participants, and for a couple of hours, I could forget about the mess that was my life. There was a woman named Sarah in the class who seemed particularly interesting. She was witty and shared a passion for food that matched my own. We started chatting, and I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Meanwhile, the divorce proceedings continued to be a roller coaster. Lisa hired a new attorney who was fierce and aggressive. During our next mediation session, I could feel the tension escalating. Lisa's lawyer tried to paint me as the bad guy, suggesting that I was the one who was being unreasonable. I bristled at the accusations but held my ground. "You need to be realistic," Lisa's attorney said, crossing her arms. "You can't expect to walk away from this without paying any alimony, especially since Lisa has sacrificed her career for your marriage." My blood boiled. Sacrificed? So cheating on me is an acceptable sacrifice? "I'm sorry, but that's not how this works." The mediator stepped in, trying to calm the situation. "Let's try to stay focused on the facts. There's a lot of emotion involved, but we need to reach an agreement." As the meeting dragged on, I felt my resolve strengthening. I was done being painted as the villain in my own story. I pulled out the evidence I had gathered, the pictures of Lisa and Jason, and laid it on the table. "Let's be honest here. Infidelity changes everything. I won't be paying for her mistakes." The room went silent. Lisa's face turned red, a mix of embarrassment and anger. She tried to defend herself, but I could see the weight of my evidence pressing down on her. The mediator shifted uncomfortably in her chair, and I felt a sense of vindication. It was finally my turn to take control of the narrative. Over the following weeks, I continued to focus on myself while navigating the divorce. I spent more time with Jake and my new friends from the cooking class. I began to experience moments of genuine joy, and I realized that I could still find happiness outside of my marriage. One evening after class, Sarah and I went out for drinks. We talked and laughed, and I found myself smiling more than I had in months. As we exchanged stories about our lives, it felt good to connect with someone who didn't know the baggage that came with my past relationship. It was refreshing and liberating, but Lisa didn't take my newfound happiness lightly. She became increasingly aggressive, trying to diminish my progress by sending me confrontational texts. "You think you can just move on? You think you're better off without me?" She would write, her words dripping with bitterness. I ignored her messages, focusing on the positive connections I was making. I started to feel lighter, but I knew that she would continue to fight dirty. I just had to stay the course. Then came the day when I received a phone call that would change everything. It was Sarah, my lawyer, and she sounded serious. "Mark, we need to talk. I think Lisa is planning to contest the divorce proceedings aggressively. She's not going to back down easily." My heart sank. "What does that mean?" "She's trying to claim that the affair was a result of your neglect in the marriage, which could complicate things for you." I felt a mixture of anger and disbelief. How dare she try to twist the narrative? I had the evidence on my side, but it was clear that Lisa was going to fight tooth and nail. I gathered my thoughts, determined to stick to my plan. I couldn't let her manipulate the situation any longer. That night I had a heart-to-heart with Jake. "I feel like this is never going to end. She's relentless," I admitted, running my hands through my hair in frustration. "Dude, you've got to stay strong. She's trying to regain control, but you've already taken the first step. You can't let her win," he said, his tone encouraging. "Just remember, you're not the bad guy here, she is." His words resonated with me, and I knew I had to keep fighting. I wasn't going to let Lisa drag me back into that cycle of manipulation and guilt. I had come too far to let her take control again. The next mediation session was scheduled, and I knew it would be crucial. I prepared myself mentally, ready to face whatever tactics she and her lawyer would throw at me. I stood in front of the mirror, reminding myself that I was strong and that I deserved to be happy. As I walked into the mediation room, I took a deep breath and steeled myself. This time, I wasn't going to let emotions cloud my judgment. I had my evidence, my support, and a newfound sense of self-worth. Lisa walked in, her demeanor more aggressive than before. There was an air of defiance about her, but I was ready. I could feel the tension building, and I knew this time was going to be different. As we sat across from each other, I could see the determination in her eyes. She wanted to win at any cost, but I was prepared to stand my ground. This was my life, and I was finally ready to take control. The stakes were high, and I knew that the battle for my future was far from over. But I felt stronger than ever. I was ready to face whatever came next. The war wasn't over yet, but I was determined to win. The tension in the mediation room was palpable as we all settled into our seats. Lisa sat across from me, her expression a mixture of anger and determination. I could tell she was ready to fight harder than ever, but I was equally prepared. This was my moment to reclaim my life, and I wasn't going to let her manipulate the narrative any longer. The mediator began the session, reminding us to focus on finding common ground. I could see Lisa's lawyer preparing her line of attack, and I steeled myself for the inevitable confrontation. The mediator opened the floor to discuss the terms of our divorce, and the first round of accusations came flying from Lisa's side. "Mark has been emotionally distant for years. It's no wonder I sought comfort elsewhere," her lawyer declared, trying to paint me as the villain in this story. "We believe that should be taken into account when discussing asset division and alimony." I felt a surge of anger. "That's a blatant lie," I interrupted, my voice steady. I was nothing but supportive. If anything, Lisa's choices led to the breakdown of our marriage, and I have the evidence to prove it. I placed the pictures of Lisa and Jason on the table. Silence fell over the room as everyone absorbed the visual evidence of her betrayal. Lisa's face turned crimson as she realized the implications of what I had just laid out. The mediator looked at Lisa, then back at me. It's clear that the infidelity has impacted the proceedings significantly. We need to focus on moving forward. As the discussion continued, the mediator worked to guide us through negotiations. Lisa's lawyer continued to push for alimony, trying to leverage the narrative of emotional neglect. But I stood my ground, calmly presenting my side of the story, emphasizing that Lisa's choices had consequences. The mediator turned to me. "Mark, how do you feel about the potential for alimony? I understand that Lisa may need support during this transition, but I believe it should be limited and contingent on her efforts to find employment," I replied, feeling a surge of confidence. "I won't be held financially responsible for her decisions." Lisa's anger flared. "You think you can just wash your hands of everything? You're being unreasonable." I could sense the desperation in her voice, and it didn't faze me. "No, Lisa, I'm being realistic. You made choices that led us here. I'm not responsible for your feelings of guilt or regret." The mediator guided us through the rest of the session, and I felt increasingly empowered as I articulated my stance. I was fighting for my future, for my happiness, and I wasn't going to let Lisa manipulate me any longer. After several hours of back-and-forth discussions, we finally reached a tentative agreement. It wasn't perfect, but it felt like a manageable compromise. As we wrapped up, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had stood my ground, and while the scars from this experience would take time to heal, I was ready to move on. In the days that followed, I finalized the divorce. I felt a sense of relief wash over me as I signed the paperwork. This chapter of my life was closing, and it was time to look forward. I would be starting anew, free from the pain of betrayal and the suffocating weight of my past. I focused on my future, pouring my energy into my newfound interests. The cooking class turned into a regular hobby, and Sarah, the woman I had met there, became a friend. She understood my situation and offered support without any expectations. I began to enjoy life again, finding joy in small moments, like cooking a new recipe or taking my dogs for long walks in the park. A few weeks later, I found myself at a local farmer's market, enjoying the atmosphere and sampling fresh produce. As I strolled through the stalls, I couldn't help but smile. I felt lighter, freer, and more in control of my destiny than ever before. While I had moments of sadness reflecting on what could have been, I also felt hopeful. I had learned valuable lessons about love, trust, and the importance of self-worth. I would never let someone else dictate my happiness again. I finally sat down to reflect on the journey. I realized that this experience, painful as it was, had forced me to confront my own needs and desires. I had emerged from the ashes of my marriage more determined than ever to seek a life filled with authenticity and joy. Looking back, I could see that I had the strength to overcome the darkest moments. I had fought for my rights, for my happiness, and for a future that was mine alone. I knew that life would throw challenges my way, but with each step forward, I felt more equipped to handle them. Sometimes, the hardest lessons lead to the most profound growth. I finally felt ready to embrace whatever came next, and for the first time in a long time, I looked forward with hope and determination. I had survived, and now I was ready to thrive.